guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Addictively Speaking podcast. I'm your host, James, and today my guest is Mitch Leff, or you might know him as Mitch Motivates. Um, he is the Chief Motivational Officer, speaker, and author. He has a book out currently, right? My Addiction,
Yes,
My
sir.
Superpower. There it is. So if you're interested, grab a copy, and we're just going to get into it with Mitch. And Mitch, tell the listeners and viewers who you are and what you're about.
Grateful to be here, James. Honored. My name is Mitch Motivates. I've been sober and started this journey since 2006, so a long time ago. Um, and I have a lot of experience, strength, and hope I would love to share with you today. I'm grateful for you to having me on the show. Despite your hoodie, I am grateful. Um, I'm from New Jersey. Love New York and New Jersey teams.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What
Um,
New York team? What New York team though? What are we talking here? Are you talking Jets? Are we talking Giants? What are we talking?
I,
Buffalo? What are we
I
talking?
honestly I honestly both like both the Jets and the Giants.
Okay.
Knicks, diehard Devils fan. Yankees. I like the Mets too a little bit. There's no real rivalry there for the Mets. Or I like the Jets and the Giants. But my diehard sport is hockey. I'm a big Devils fan. Um,
Nice.
So yeah. So sports are amazing. It's something I've learned to love again in sobriety. I used to love it as a kid. Then
Yeah.
I was like
Oh,
not even
yeah.
interested, and
Yeah.
now I'm back again, and just rooting against Philly and any Philly team, and the New York Rangers, rooting for them to lose. Um, but I will give the 76ers props. They just did they bought 2,000 tickets for their recent home game. I think it could be tonight. It's game 6 of the series. When this comes out, we'll know who won. But they bought they try to buy out tickets so Knicks fans wouldn't buy tickets, and they gave it away to like Philly healthcare workers.
Okay.
They gave it away as a donation. I thought that was awesome. Total respect to the Philly ownership over there. That's cool.
Nice.
But anyway, I've been doing this since 2006. I want to take you back to high school. High
Yeah.
school, Mitch was a nerd. I played video games. I didn't go out to any parties. I, you know, I just was a good kid, but a nerd. I loved, you know, on a Friday night playing video games and like having sleepovers with other guys talking about you know, anime or like Final Fantasy. Like I was not anywhere near an addict. Um,
Yeah.
and then what happened is I tried alcohol for the first time. Nothing out of the blue. It like two other guys in my friend's basement, and his parents weren't home, and he was like, "My dad has some beer. Let's have some." So we drank, and I was like, "Man, this is good. This is good." And from that point on, I was a drinker, and I proceeded to, never really understood what normal or social drinking was. I drank to get drunk. I drank for the
Yeah.
not for the taste, but for the feeling, not for the taste, for
Yeah.
being, drunk outside yourself. And
Yeah.
I started stealing right away. I started stealing like wine bottles from family members or friends' parents. I started raiding my parents' liquor cabinet and getting like taking out liquor and like replacing it with water in the cabinet and then drinking, you know, um, having
I've done
friends'
that.
brother, yeah, having like brothers, friends' brothers buy um, liquor. I mean, you name it, I've done it. And That preceded my drinking. And pretty soon it was getting too much for me to continue up, but the alcohol because I was so young. I was like 16 years old at this point. And so I decided to start smoking weed. A
Mm.
friend that I was drinking with introduced me to weed, marijuana, pot, however you want to call it, and I started changing my lifestyle. So they say it's easier for me if you're under 21 to get weed because the drug dealer doesn't card, right? Alcohol, a liquor store will card. So like I
Yeah.
always could get weed. So I started smoking a lot of weed, and then I started changing my friend groups. I started smoking weed with younger people. I started making new friends who were smoking weed. I was like, this is cool. And before you know it, anytime I did anything, I would either drink or get high and do anything, family events, dinners, um, birthday parties. You know, pretty soon I would smoke weed like in the mornings to go to school. And I built my life around the using, and that was pretty quick. You know, meaning like I got rid of all the friends I had growing up, and I started making new friends, like younger groups of people, and I would
Hmm.
smoke with like each group like 4 or 5 times a day. Sorry, once a day each group, but 4 or 5 times a day in general. And that was kind
Right.
of my life in high school. Like it picked up really quickly because I feel like I don't know, there was something in my brain just switched, and it was like, I like this. I like the feeling. I like the feeling of alcohol, but that was harder to get. I like the feeling of weed, like just keep going. And I always
Hmm.
like was able to get out of any consequences. Like I remember, I would smoke weed so much I like didn't get homework done or study for tests. So one time I like cheated on a paper and then I got caught by the teacher. And then I remember I just like made an excuse to get out of it. Everything was an excuse. Pretty soon, one of the groups of people I would smoke with introduced me to cocaine. And that's what really caused my downfall. It was probably like junior year of high school, maybe senior year, like maybe the summer. It was
Yeah.
before senior year, some around that timeline. I was like 16 years old, and as soon as I tried the coke, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then it's like, forget the alcohol, forget the weed. I'm like doing coke, and I did it the same way. I would do it before school, during school. I wouldn't, but the coke, it really, again, I started to change my lifestyle, but it really became like a degenerate kind of lifestyle with the cocaine. Like I wouldn't be able to show up for things. I would start to get increasingly paranoid, and it would cost more money for the habit. So that really didn't, I'll get to that later with the money, but cocaine, they say cocaine's one hell of a drug, and it really is. And I like was in this like daze of addiction where it didn't matter to me. I didn't think anything of it that I was doing cocaine in high school. So I started having consequences, as like I said, I started changing friend groups. Um, a big consequence that I could first think of was uh, a friend of mine wrote an anonymous letter to my parents telling them that like who I was becoming, that I was like causing trouble. I remember getting it, my parents confronting me about that, and me thinking like, wow, I'm totally a different person now. Like I'm starting to become a badass. I went from like video game nerd to badass, and I kind of like almost embraced that lifestyle because like some random letter to my parents, like that wasn't that big of a deal. But I started embracing that lifestyle. People started like, you know, talking that like if you wanted cocaine, ask Mitch. Like that's who I was. Fast forward a little bit, I had got into college, and I'm graduating high school. By this time, like I'm doing coke multiple times a week. I'm smoking weed every day, and I'm drinking alcohol every time chance I get. I ended up getting arrested graduation night from high school. Um, and so the consequent, like everyone is celebrating. I'm handcuffed to a chair. That was the first time I got arrested. So it's like everyone is moving on with their lives, and I'm like stuck in this troublemaker phase. I'm getting arrested. I'm changing all my friends. Like this is who I'm becoming. I remember July 4th. Something stands out. The summer before I went to college, one of the guys who this guy was going to college with me. He kind of pulled me aside and was like, Mitch, I'm hearing that you're doing a lot of drugs. We know you got arrested. He's like, when we're at Indiana, we both got into Indiana University. He was like, Mitch, when we're both there next year, I think you should slow down a bit. And I remember that because I wore that like a badge of honor. I was like, oh my God, look at this. And it kind of added to like my troublemaker, like I got arrested, kind of like bad. All of a sudden, I'm a badass kind of thing. And I really embraced it. And the arrest, it was a big deal, but it was like, my life continued as normal because I was going away to college. So it's like, it wasn't like I basically got out of it. And I just like kept that up. Like And that's when like the lying, yeah, it started like to steamroll into this like addiction snowball, if you will. So fast forward again, I'm at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. There is nothing around except farmland, and you know, you 45 minutes away from Indianapolis is a college town. And man, I went downhill so quickly when I was alone at college. Like I didn't have the support system or the money of living at home with my parents, and I was alone.
Yeah.
So I just kept up that like degenerate cocaine lifestyle. All the money I had went to coke. I had multiple dealers. Before you know it, I had people coming after me because I owed them money. Then I started to pull like different type of money scams, like selling clothes, selling books, like at the college bookstore. I started stealing at this point, and my life was revolving around waking up and doing cocaine. So I was like, at that point, like I would pretty quickly in a couple years turn into a drug addict. I would wear these slippers around campus, and they were like, I didn't shower that much, like every couple days. The only reason I showered was to clear out my nose so I could do more drugs. And so they knew me as like this like guy that like I didn't really eat because the coke doesn't it kills your appetite suppressant. So I was skinny, I didn't shower, and I smelled. I didn't really brush my teeth, and I wore these like slippers around, and that's who people know me as. I would smoke cigarettes, and at one point I couldn't even afford cigarettes, so I would walk around to like cigarette butt holders and take the cigarette out and smoke like two puffs, and that was me smoking a pack of cigarettes. I heard that before in a fast forward like many years. I heard that before from someone else who was sober, that like he had a bag and he would collect cigarette butts and smoke that like one or two puffs, and that was him smoking a pack of cigarettes. And I was like, dude, that is me, you know.
I've
And
seen people do that. I've seen people walk around
yeah,
like and just pick up. They see somebody drop it on the ground and they'll pick it straight up right after they're done,
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
like, "Oh, I'll smoke the rest of that."
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like I was spending hundreds of dollars a day on cocaine, but I couldn't afford a pack of cigarettes, and I was comfortable with that. Like that just adds to like the degenerate like lifestyle of like
Yeah.
not taking care of myself, and the only thing that mattered was the coke. Because I literally I woke up, I was like, how could I get money to get high today? That was my life, and I didn't shower, didn't eat, didn't take care of myself. My roommate had moved out at the time, so I had my dorm room to myself. It was bad. And pretty soon I was like running out of money, and I needed to figure some stuff out. I mean, during this time, it was like some crazy stories that like stick out during this time. We went to Indianapolis from Bloomington to get some cocaine, and we were paranoid about driving back with it. So we took a deodorant stick, we lifted up the deodorant, and we put the baggie inside the thing, and then we put the deodorant back on, screwed it in, and it was like a white antiperspirant. So when
Hmm.
we get back to the dorm, I remember clearly I'm opening it, and the baggie broke. And then here I am on my hands and knees on the floor snorting deodorant like off the floor because I couldn't waste the baggie. I'm like putting like numbing it, putting it on my mouth, but it's deodorant, right? Because it was all mixed together. But I was like, I don't give a like I need like fiending, right? And that's who I was. Another story was I went I went away for like winter break, and I come back to school, and the kids from the dorm pulled me in a room, and they were looking up rehabs in Indiana because they were like, Mitch, you have a problem, dude. Like you're a degenerate cocaine addict. Like you need help. But like I was like, whatever. And like a week later, I remember selling them my laptop computer that I just got brand new, because that was the next thing to get money, selling the laptop. And I remember actually sold the laptop twice. I sold the laptop to a guy. He gave me money. Then I told him I needed to get it fixed, and then I would give it to him. Like lying was just like what I did. And then
Hmm.
I owed my drug dealer money, so I just said that to him. He gave me the money. I owed money to a drug dealer, so I gave the drug dealer the computer. And then I took his money to buy drugs from another drug dealer. Like it was insanity.
Jeez.
So my bottom half, like I have many more stories, but like I want to get to the bottom, and I want to get to my
Yeah.
recovery, and then I want to get to
Absolutely.
the book. So my bottom happened April of my freshman year. I went back to Jersey for a family event. I ended up running away from home. While I was in New Jersey, I had access to my parents' credit cards. I would use those to buy, I would steal them. I would buy gift cards for like American Express or like a mall, and I would use the
Yeah.
gift cards to buy drugs. It would be I would be like 80 cents on the dollar. Like he would give me like $40 worth of drugs for like a $50 gift card, but still, that's what I would do. And they didn't ask for ID back then, so I basically had like an unlimited supply of like gift cards, and it was crazy. I was home for a whole weekend and I couldn't face my parents, so I ended up running away. I slept at my drug dealer's house. My drug dealer said I needed to go to rehab because what I was doing was crazy. So at that point, I had no safe space, and my drug dealer wouldn't even let me stay with him. I was such a good customer, you know. This guy Gary, I'll never forget this guy. We So I ended up running away to some motel room, and Sunday rolls around. I'm up for like 72 hours on a bender. I'm like having a moment that I literally the jig is up because at this point I ran away from home. I was out of money. I didn't know what to do. My parents ended up filing a missing persons report because I ran away and didn't tell them where I was going, like the back of a milk carton, like missing person. And I hear a knock on the door. All of a sudden, it's like five police officers at the motel room. By that time, I did all the drugs, and they come. I start crying. I was like, guys, I need help. Thank God, I like embrace them. I was like, thank God you're here. I need help. They took me to a hospital because that's where you take a missing person. And my parents came, my family came, and a week later I was in rehab. It was like that. I was like, I need help. I can't stop using drugs. I was crying. I had IVs on my arm, missing person, ended up in the hospital. And I said I needed help, and they found a rehab for me to go to. And a week later, I was in treatment. And that starts my recovery, James. And I would want to talk about that. If you have any questions about my using, I would love to answer more.
Um, it seems like it all happened so quick. Like for
Yeah,
you, it was like instantaneous. Like you
yeah.
found one thing, went straight to the next thing. Um, does it run in your family at all? Is there any history of using, or do you think it's just something personally inside of you that is just different?
Um, I have a cousin. I have a couple. Yes, and I mean yes and no. It does run in my family, but
Right.
let's be honest. Nowadays, thank God people are talking about this more and more. But almost every other family has someone that they know that's in recovery for something: eating,
Yeah.
sex, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, whatever. So yeah, I mean, but like, I just think that this is something that I was just born with, and I believe this is between my ears, mental, and the
Yeah.
drugs and the alcohol just turned a switch. You know,
Yeah. Do you think it was you like no matter what, you were gonna have
yeah,
an unhealthy relationship because you didn't the way you explain it, you explain drinking like to me, like that's how I drank. Like I didn't drink to be social. I didn't drink to enjoy myself. I drank to get hammered, like
yes,
completely obliterated.
yeah,
That was the goal. That was the purpose. Don't know why everybody else is just having a good time and
yeah,
drinking 3 beers and getting a buzz. That wasn't the purpose. Um,
mhm,
so I get that. That's kind of like how feel in my head is that like
yeah,
I don't have an off switch and I just go. I just
yep,
go. Um, so it spirals out of control.
yeah,
Was there any
and then
point was there any point
go ahead.
in all of that where you thought like this might be a problem, or because it
Yeah, I mean,
consumed you so
yeah,
fast, did you just like
yeah.
not
I
have a
remember the
chance?
period of time. Yeah, the period of time when I was in college, and my roommate had moved out because I was like, he thought I was disgusting and like a safety risk. So the period where my roommate moved out, he requested a transfer to another room. Between there, maybe it was like 6 months, October to like April. Like that period of time was very much like I knew I had an issue and I couldn't stop. I remember looking up maybe going to the army, and I looked up transferring to a college in Florida. I remember saying, maybe that will solve my problem. It's too cold in Indiana. Or maybe I should just go to the army I literally thought about enlisting in the army, and that would like a fresh reset. Maybe that, you know what I mean? So I knew, and I just didn't have the tools yet to stop. Um, and I did something big. I ran away, and then they found me, and then I went, and then we were lucky because we trusted the experts. I went to one addiction psychiatrist. He told me to go to this place. He heard of this place. I said okay. A week later, I went. And I love to talk about my recovery and how I got
Yeah.
ended up writing a book and what I do now.
Yeah, let's talk
Uh,
about it. Let's talk about your recovery, how it started.
yeah, yeah,
What were your steps? What were you doing? What was that like?
yeah. So I went to treatment in Pennsylvania. Um, I went to 28 days in Wernersville, Pennsylvania. A great treatment center, and I thought I was going to leave after the first month. They were very much including the family. So like the second or third week, there was like a family weekend, and then at the end of the family weekend, I was told that I'm not leaving after 28 days like I thought, and that my parents had decided to have me stay there for an extra 90-day program for their extended care program. So was
Mm,
there for a total of 4 months. So it's like right away and I was iffy about it, but eventually I was like, yeah, I'll be here. This is cool. Um, and I was like, I had to be away. I had to complete reset. I had to learn the tools. Um, it was in rehab that 12 step was brought into the treatment center. Meetings were brought in. I remember we were all given books, Alcoholics Anonymous big books.
mhm,
Before we ate any meal, we lined up and we had to recite 12 steps. They would take us in the extended care program. They took us out to meetings, and that's really when I started to learn about recovery. But I was still in a treatment center, so it wasn't like they recommended when I was done with that I go to a sober living, a halfway house in the Poconos, and that's really
mhm,
when I started living as life as a sober man. You could learn about the tools. I remember in treatment they said, imagine a toolbox, and you have your 12, you have your meetings in that, you have your supportive family, you have a phone, you have a car to get to meetings or whatever, and like you have a therapist, all the different things you have in this sober toolbox. So I learned about it, but I didn't know how to practice it. So the next step of treatment after rehab was very helpful to me. So they said that go to this guy's house in the Poconos. So I lived with this guy. It was all boys. It was boutique. There was like 4 or 5 people. It's where I went back to school. I failed out of school when I was using, and I excelled when I was sober. So I went to community college. Took some classes. I got a job. I got a job as a waiter where I learned to show up and I learned to, make money for myself. Very useful. I started volunteering and we were helping the community. I started, paying some of my own bills. He took me to get a phone and I paid the phone bill. I would send money home to my parents to start repaying them back for all the stuff I put them through and all the money so, he said, I want you to go to a certain number of meetings a week. I want you to do fellowship. So go eat with guys after the meeting. Go meet some of the guys that are young and sober. And I started developing the community. I started working with a sponsor, and he incentivized me. He's like, you'll be able to have your car up here when you work get up to step 3 with the sponsor. So I started living my recovery program, how I was living it, how I was learning in 12 step and out of 12 step. 12 step recovery program is working the steps, is a sponsor, is having friends that are sober. But my recovery program extends way beyond that. It's, learning how to work and be a worker among workers, learning how to go to school and getting a degree. This is part of my recovery. Like, this is what I've learned, and it's taken many years to learn how valuable that was at that point. But I was really learning about how to be in recovery, because being in recovery is contributing to society. It's not getting sober and then moving to a remote island and just not drinking, you know?
yeah,
So this is what I was doing. And then, I to speed up how I made it to where I am now, I left the halfway house and moved in with guys from the halfway house. I lived in the Pennsylvania for a year and a half total. 2 different apartments after the halfway house. I found out that Rutgers University had a program for students in recovery. So I eventually made the move from Pennsylvania to Rutgers. and I
Hmm.
was in their program, and they had like a sober dorm for students in recovery. So that was awesome. So it was like living around people in recovery. And then I was there for 3 years. I got to study abroad in Italy. I got to graduate college, all sober. And then I moved to New York City because of a job, like where I wanted to get a job. And I knew that New York had an amazing sober community. And I moved in with one of the guys I met at Rutgers. So I moved in with a sober roommate. I'm in a new city, but I had like my foundation. I
Yeah.
call that having, I had just had such smart feet. I just took the next right action and I followed my feet, not followed what I thought was best for me. I followed what the experts were telling me, what I had at this point, like so many mentors to run stuff by. So I made my way to New York, and I spent a year living with a sober roommate, and eventually I moved out, and I moved into a studio apartment in New York, and now at this point I was on my own, and I've been on my own ever since. Um, I've been in New York for 10 years. I recently moved out to the suburbs of Connecticut, about 45-minute drive from the city. But I
Hmm.
recently moved out. So I was in New York for 10 years. Then I moved to Connecticut. So in New York, I had multiple jobs. Um, I started working in PR for like some random office. Then eventually I started working in recovery for a recovery company where we specialized in sober livings and other recovery services. And I did that for like 7 years. And then I ended up leaving and starting my own company, a recovery services company, Mitch Motivates. And I was doing some recovery coaching, was doing some companioning, some transports, helping get people to rehab, flying people, guys to rehab. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but I was really helping people out based on my experience being in recovery and working in recovery. And but it was a lot for me. It was a lot for me when I ran my own recovery company. And after like that, this is good 9 years working in recovery and being in recovery. I
Hmm.
decided to transition out of my job and I started working. I met a plastic surgeon and I started working in medicine for his office.
Mm.
And it was really refreshing to have that separation from my own recovery and my own life and like my day
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And I really encourage anyone. It's like, and I write about it. I'll get to my book. I write about it in my book. There's pluses and minuses for working in recovery. Like it's good if you work for a rehab. If you work for what I did, a recovery company, it's good to be reminded of it. But and to every patient that we had was like me years before, and I could see
Mm.
myself in everyone. But like after a while, it's like I need a break. Like recovery is my bridge back to life. So I'm like happy today that I have a job that's not in a sober environment. Like I work around people that drink, that do drugs. I'm a normal place, right? Normal life,
Yeah.
and I really take that worker among workers to heart because like I'm able to excel at my job because I'm able to suit up, show up early, work extra hard because I have a program to fall back on and it's just really refreshing today. But that leads me to my book because after a couple of years working in medicine, I miss like giving back always to recovery. And I decided, the pandemic really sparked it because I really got into reading. I got into podcasts during the pandemic because we had a lot of time and it was a great way to get information around podcasts, books, and
Yeah.
I had the idea that I've been sober a long time at this point, and I should write my story down. And it's funny, I like had the idea. All of a sudden, I meet someone, this who was my publicist for the book, this awesome woman and she had written a couple books for this publisher, Post
Hmm.
Hill Press, and she told me she's like, Mitch, you have an amazing story. Have you ever thought about writing a book? I was like, that's so weird. I was just thinking about it. I'm getting it to reading. Like, this is awesome. So she's like, I want you to go home, write a summary of what you think the book would be. I actually have, and she said, I have a lunch the next week with the publisher. I'm going to pitch him your book. And I want you to make me one promise, she said. She's like, if I pitch him the book and he likes it, I'm going to, I'm going to help you do it, but you're going to hire my company to do publicity when the book comes out, whenever that may be. I said, Mindy, we did a handshake deal.
Yeah.
So she pitched the idea. He loved it. And I got a book deal. And it was just like so amazing. So part of the book deal would be like that the publisher would help me promote the book. You know, it's now on
Hmm.
Amazon. They help with that. It's on barnesandnoble.com. They help with a lot of stuff. And Mindy, this woman, she helped me get a ghostwriter, and I worked with a ghostwriter writing my story out. And then I was given a deadline. And like about a year later, when the process started, I had a book. It came out in January of 2024. So a couple months ago. And then now I have this book. And what I did is I wrote my recovery journey out from the beginning, like we did in this podcast, to the end,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
moving to Connecticut. Um, and writing the book. I wrote out the process of writing the book, and I really explained everything. And that's the book. And it's like a guide of like my journey in recovery. And what I did is I broke it down into 12 chapters, and I summed up each chapter with a tip, like a summary or a tip to give advice on each point of my life. And I kind of try to tie it to that point in my life. For example, is one is too many because it's never enough, because that was about using. The second chapter is called rehab. Um, and at the end of that chapter, my tip, I give like advice on if someone wants to go to treatment, how they can get what resources. I list two websites to go get resources to find treatment centers for you. So like I'm really like into making it super practical. So my story and the 12 tips for overcoming addiction. And then we're we're here today. You know, I needed a break from the city. I moved to Connecticut. I commute to work and my day job. I'm super productive on my day job that they call me the chief motivator, because this is the kind of energy a sober person who's doing the deal brings to life. I'm an author. I was able to do that while working another job, and I was able to have this book come out. I went around the country: New York, Connecticut, Philly, California, Florida, and I went to Barnes and Noble stores and I did book signings and I met people. And like I'm gonna see what happens this summer. We're gonna keep on doing it, man. And I'm grateful to share my story, um, my experience, strength, and hope. Again, I'll hold the book up one more time. You could buy it on my website, mitchmotivates.com. You could buy it on Amazon, barnesandnobles.com. And yeah, all I'm about is spreading the message, because I know that at least one person's going to listen and be and contact me, contact you, and we're going to help them.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
what I'm all about,
absolutely.
brother, and that's why we're here today.
Wow. Mitch, what a story, man. Um,
Yeah,
it's awesome to see like what a turnaround like sobriety can make for people, like the
yeah.
transformation in your life and the way you just set out and just blazed a trail. Now, you have the nickname Mitch Motivates, but what motivates Mitch? I want to know what motivates you, because that's the
Yeah,
key. You're motivating other people, but what's your
yeah,
motivation? What keeps you going?
yeah. I mean, look, that's a great question. Um, Really, the more time, the more years I have in recovery, um, I have this thing that I say for those who can't. You know that there's a couple people. I've been to a lot of funerals, and there's a couple people that are not here anymore, and they died because of this disease. So I'm going. What keeps me motivated is those people. What keeps me motivated is the sober guy who can't keep a job, who just is unable to show up, and is like is doing well in a couple other areas, but he's like he just can't show up at 7:55 when the boss says get here at 8. Like he's always there at 8:15. He's always making excuses, like that guy. Um, the like I'm just doing it for those who can't and for those who we've lost. And there's a lot of people, and I know that like I don't even need people to tell me. I know that I'm continuing to set the example of what a sober man is. I know that there's a lot of people that are like not doing the right thing, and I'm doing it for those people. And there's a lot of people on a daily basis that keep me motivated. So there you go. And I'm doing
That's
it.
awesome.
I wouldn't be, yeah. And the last thing I'll say is I'm doing it for my family, because they've what I put them through and their endless support. Like every single member of my family supports me. Um, One of my cousins, I'll never forget, at his sister's wedding. You know, they always have grape juice available. I'm Jewish, and we do a prayer over the wine,
Mm,
and they always have grape juice available for me like clockwork, and that is years grape juice. So meaningful.
yeah,
And
it's the small things,
by
isn't
accident,
it?
yeah, yeah. And by accident, my cousin handed me a cup, and it had wine, and I'm about to drink it, and he like leaped to smack it out of my hand, and like that kind of stuff is, I do it for them. So I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't talk about my family. And yeah,
So what's next? What do you do? You wrote a book.
yeah,
You work a job. What's next? What's next on the agenda? Where do you go from
yeah.
here?
I'm going to answer that by saying the following. What how I do I was learned in my program of recovery, faith without works is dead. I was learned that I wake up, and every day I ask God to keep me sober, but then I have to take the actions in order to do it. And I was learned that I show up and let God handle the results, that we're not in the results business. So what's next is I'm going to keep on doing the next right thing. I love podcasts. Maybe I'll start a podcast. I would love to be on more podcasts and spread the message. I'm an author. I'm going to see how the book goes. Like, maybe this turns into something. Maybe someone sees my book and they hire me to be a speaker. My one of my friends is the head of. Here's an example of showing up and letting God handle the results and doing the next right thing. And faith without works is dead. My friend Molly is the head of HR for a big company. They do jewelry. They make jewelry.
Hmm.
And when my book came out, Molly bought 100 books, and she is going to distribute a couple books to each one of her stores around the country. And she's going to tell, the HR policy at her company is going to be, if you struggle with addiction, you're going to be given a book, and you're going to be given my contact info. Which is like, what the wow, like,
Yeah.
maybe more of that. Maybe more corporate. I, the answer is I don't know what's next, but if I keep on showing up and doing the next right thing, something good is going to happen. Um, I'll tell you that.
That's, you know what? I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the things that like, me putting this podcast together, I
Yeah.
worked really hard at building it and growing it. And,
Mhm.
fate has it that I post in a group, I get connected with you, we connect together, these, like you said, the next right thing. So yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap things up?
James, I'm really good. I said a lot. I'm big into self promotion. So again, I'll say you could find me on mitchmotivates.com. My social media handles are Mitch Motivates on everything, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Um, and I would have anyone check out my book. Go on Amazon, get my book. It comes next day. And you'll see my story where I list out my journey in recovery and some tips to help you or a family member. Oh, I'm just grateful that you took the time to hear me out. And I'd love to connect again. Let's chat offline more. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So before I end all my shows, I need three things that you need in your recovery. What are the three things you need? You can't go a day without. You got to have them. They're the cornerstone, the foundations.
Okay. Prayer and meditation and my relationship with my higher power. So faith. Number one is faith.
Yes.
Number two is community. Um,
Yes.
from late last night when I was driving home, call a guy that lives in California that used to live here that I'm friends with. This morning, I talked to a couple guys. I my sponsor, like the community of people, because like they're able to show me that it's possible. Sometimes you can't even pray for something if you don't know what you're looking for. But if I see a sober guy with 15 years that has a wife and kid, and I don't have a wife and kid, I can be like, wow, that's going to be me one day. So the community. And number three is my friends and family. Like I have friends that are not sober. I have family that are not sober, and they support me. And it's important that I have that outside of my recovery. Other people that are not in that community. and they're mostly friends, family, and my dog. So that's it.
Nice. Awesome. A great list. All of them are
Thank you.
great in their own way. Um,
Thanks, James.
Mitch, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm very
Grateful.
appreciative of your time. Thank you, and we will connect. I will stay in
Yeah.
contact with you. I promise you that.
Yes,
But thank
sir.
you for coming on and spending your time sharing your story. So, all the links to Mitch's stuff will be in the description of the video. I will
Thank you.
post it. So if you can get a copy of Mitch's book, give it a read, and listen, experience his journey and take his tips and learn from
Thank you.
Mitch.
God bless
Thanks,
you,
Mitch.
James, and talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Bye.